I always thought betrayal would feel like a sudden punch to the gut. Instead, it crept up slowly, wrapping around my throat like a silk scarf until I couldn't breathe. The day I caught them together, I wasn't even supposed to be home. My name is Ivy, and I was supposed to be picking out flower arrangements for my wedding. But a migraine had forced me to reschedule, and I returned to find my sister Sophie's car in our driveway. Strange, since she should have been at work. The front door was unlocked. I heard giggling from upstairs, my bedroom. My feet felt heavy as I climbed each step, my heart already knowing what my mind refused to accept. "Jamie." Sophie's voice drifted through the crack in the door. "We should tell her soon." "I know, baby. After the wedding, okay? We'll figure it out." My hand trembled as I pushed the door open. There they were, my fiancé and my sister, tangled in my sheets. The same sheets Jamie and I had picked out together at Bed Bath & Beyond last month. "Ivy!" Sophie scrambled to cover herself, but Jamie just sat there, frozen. "Oh God, this isn't... we were going to..." "Going to what?" My voice sounded foreign, eerily calm. "Wait until after the wedding to tell me you've been sleeping with my fiancé." Jamie finally found his voice. "Ivy, please! We didn't mean for this to happen, it just... did." I laughed. Actually laughed. "How long?" Sophie started crying. 3 months, and I'm pregnant." The room spun. 3 months. While I'd been planning our wedding, picking out china patterns and writing my vows, they'd been planning their own future. "Get out," I whispered. When neither moved, I grabbed Jamie's clothes from the floor and threw them at him. "Get out!" They dressed quickly, Sophie sobbing the entire time. I stood in the doorway, blocking their exit. "The ring." Jamie blinked. "What?" "The engagement ring. Give it back." He slipped it off my finger, his touch making my skin crawl. As they shuffled past me, Sophie reached for my arm. "Ivy, please, we need to talk about this." I jerked away. "Don't touch me, ever again." The next few days passed in a blur. My mother called constantly, leaving voicemails that grew increasingly frustrated. "Ivy, you need to come home. Sophie's devastated. She needs her sister right now." I finally answered on the 4th day. "She needs me? Are you serious?" "Sweetheart, these things happen. Sophie and Jamie. They're in love, real love, and with the baby coming..." "Stop," my voice cracked. "Just stop. We're having a family dinner tonight," she continued as if I hadn't spoken. "Everyone will be there. We need to discuss the situation like adults." I showed up against my better judgment. The dining room felt suffocating. Sophie and Jamie sitting together, my mother hovering anxiously, my father staring at his plate. "We're getting married next month," Sophie announced, her hand protectively over her stomach. "A small ceremony, nothing fancy." My mother beamed. "Isn't it wonderful? You'll be an aunt, Ivy." I stood up so quickly my chair toppled backward. "Wonderful. My sister sleeps with my fiancé, gets pregnant, and that's wonderful." "Now, Ivy," my father finally spoke, "what's done is done. We need to move forward as a family." "A family?" I grabbed my purse. "You want to know what family does? Family protects each other. Family doesn't steal your happiness and expect you to celebrate their betrayal." Sophie started crying again. She'd always been good at that. "Please, Ivy, I love him. We love each other." I looked at them all. My sister's tears, Jamie's guilty face, my parents' pleading eyes. In that moment, something inside me hardened. They wanted me to forgive and forget, to play the supportive sister and daughter. Instead, I walked to the door, pausing only to say, "Congratulations on your perfect little family. I hope you're all very happy together." As I drove away, my phone buzzed with messages I wouldn't read. They thought this was the end, poor Ivy, running away to lick her wounds. But they were wrong. This wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. I pulled into my best friend Eric's driveway, my hand steady on the wheel for the first time in days. He opened the door before I could knock, took one look at my face, and pulled me into a hug. "I need your help. I whispered against his shoulder. Anything. I want to buy a house. I pulled back to meet his confused gaze. Their dream house, specifically, and I know exactly how to do it. 6 months can change everything. I sat in Craig's office, watching him review the quarterly reports I'd prepared. My mentor's eyebrows rose higher with each page. Ivy, these numbers are exceptional. He set down the papers. You've doubled your client portfolio since spring. I smiled, thinking of the sleepless nights and endless coffee runs that had gotten me here. Thank you. I've been focused. Focused is an understatement. The board's noticed. There's talk of a promotion. My phone buzzed. Another ignored text from Sophie. I switched it to silent without looking. Speaking of focus, Craig leaned forward. How's the house hunting going? Actually, I'm closing on a property next week. I tried to keep my voice neutral. The Victorian on Maple Grove. Craig whistled. That's quite a purchase for a first-time buyer. You sure about this? More than anything. After work, I met Eric at our usual coffee shop. He was already there, laptop open, real estate documents spread across the table. The sellers accepted your offer, he said without preamble. But there's something else. Look at this. He turned his laptop toward me. On the screen was Sophie's social media post. Can't wait to start our new chapter. Dream home. Baby on the way. Below was a photo of her and Jamie in front of the same Victorian house I was about to own. They don't know, I said, sipping my coffee. They think they're getting it. Ivy. Eric ran a hand through his hair. Are you absolutely sure about this? Once you sign those papers... They're meeting the realtor tomorrow, I cut in, to make their offer. An offer they can't afford, by the way. I've seen Jamie's financials. How did you... Denise in accounting. She owed me a favor. Eric closed his laptop. You've thought of everything, haven't you? Almost. I pulled out my phone, showing him the invitation I'd just received. Sophie's having a housewarming party next month, for a house she doesn't own yet. My phone rang. My mother this time. I declined the call. They're going to hate you for this, Eric said quietly. They already do. They just pretend they don't. The next week passed in a blur of signatures and legal documents. I sat in my lawyer's office, pen hovering over the final paper. Once you sign, she said, the house is yours. All renovations and modifications will be at your discretion. I signed. Walking out, I bumped into Denise from work. Hey, I was just heading to your office. Did you hear about Sophie and Jamie? My stomach tightened. What about them? Their loan application was denied. They're devastated. Sophie's been crying all over Facebook about losing their dream home. I forced a sympathetic frown. That's terrible. I know, and with the baby coming... Denise lowered her voice. Your mom called the office looking for you. Said Sophie really needs her sister right now. I'm sure she does. Back at my desk, I opened my email to find the contractor's quote for renovations. The amount would barely dent my savings. Unlike Sophie and Jamie, I'd been smart with my money. My phone lit up with a text from Eliana. Family dinner tonight. Please come. They're announcing the baby's gender. I typed back, can't. Working late. You can't avoid them forever, she replied. Watch me. That evening, I stood in front of my new house. My house. The porch needed work, the paint was peeling, but it was mine. All mine. Eric pulled up in his car. Thought I'd find you here. Just imagining the possibilities. I turned to him. Want to see inside? We walked through empty rooms that echoed with our footsteps. Sophie and Jamie had planned their whole future here. The nursery upstairs, the kitchen remodel, the garden parties. When are you telling them? Eric asked. Soon. I walked to the bay window, the one Sophie had gushed about on social media. They're having a girl, you know, found out today. Ivy. Don't. I pressed my hand against the cool glass. Don't make me feel guilty about this. They didn't feel guilty about what they did to me. My phone buzzed again. This time, I looked. It was Sophie's housewarming invitation, sent to the entire family group chat. Join us in celebrating our new home. Can't wait to share this special moment with everyone we love. Eric read over my shoulder. She still doesn't know. No. I smiled, remembering the renovation schedule I'd just approved. But she will. Very soon. I took one last look around what would have been their dream home. In 30 days, the contractors would arrive. In 31 days, Sophie and Jamie would realize exactly what they'd lost. And I would be there to watch it all unfold. You're different lately, Denise said, studying me over lunch. Calmer, almost scary calm. I stirred my salad, watching lettuce leaves swirl like tiny green boats. I'm just focused on work. Please, you're plotting something. She leaned closer. Spill. Before I could respond, Sophie walked into the restaurant, her baby bump now obvious under her flowing dress. I ducked behind my menu, but it was too late. Ivy, she waddled over, Jamie trailing behind her. I've been trying to reach you for weeks. I've been busy. I kept my voice light, professional. The restaurant was full of my colleagues. Congratulations on the gender reveal. You'd know more if you'd come to family dinners. Sophie pulled up a chair uninvited. We miss you. Jamie stood awkwardly beside her. Hey, Ivy. I ignored him, gathering my things. Sorry, I have a meeting. Wait. Sophie grabbed my arm. The housewarming party. You're coming, right? We found another house, even better than the Victorian. Everything happens for a reason, you know. I met her eyes. Does it? Of course, like me and Jamie. Sometimes the universe knows better than we do. Denise choked on her water. The universe. I stood up. Right. Well, I wouldn't miss your housewarming for anything. Outside, Denise caught up with me. Okay, what was that? You looked like you were about to either cry or commit murder. Neither. I checked my phone, an email from the contractors confirming next week's start date. I'm just giving the universe a little help. Back at the office, Eric was waiting by my desk. Emergency best friend meeting. Now. He dragged me to the stairwell, our usual spot for private conversations. I just overheard Jamie on the phone. He's in trouble, Ivy. Big trouble. What kind of trouble? Gambling debts. He's been betting on sports games, losing big. That's why they couldn't get the house loan. I leaned against the wall. Does Sophie know? No, he's telling everyone they chose a different house because it's better for the baby. Eric ran a hand through his hair. This changes things, right? Changes what? Your plan. I mean, they're already suffering. Maybe that's enough. I thought about my mother's voice messages, all about how Sophie needed support, how blessed they were, how I needed to move on. About Jamie's hand on my sister's stomach at the restaurant, the same hand that used to hold mine. No, I said, it's not enough. That night, I drove past their current apartment. The lights were on, shadows moving behind curtains. They looked happy, normal, like they hadn't destroyed someone else's life to build their own. My phone rang. Eliana. Before you say no, she said when I answered. Hear me out. Family brunch. Sunday. Just you and me. And, okay, yes, Sophie and your mom will be there. But so will I. Running interference. Please. I hate being stuck between everyone. I sighed. Fine. 1 hour. Sunday arrived too quickly. I walked into the cafe to find Sophie already crying. These hormones, she sniffled as I sat down. I'm just so happy you came. My mother beamed. See, this is what family does. We come together. Eliana caught my eye and mouthed, sorry. So, Sophie wiped her eyes. The new house is perfect. The owners accepted our offer right away. Jamie says it's meant to be. When do you move in? I asked, knowing the answer. 3 weeks. Just in time to set up the nursery before I get too big. She pulled out her phone. Want to see the photos? The previous owners are doing some renovations before we move in. I looked at the pictures, my house, my renovations. Lovely. We're thinking of calling her Ivy, Sophie said suddenly, after you, to show there are no hard feelings. The cafe went silent. Even my mother looked uncomfortable. "No," I said quietly. "You don't get to do that. But you don't get to steal my life and then name your baby after me like it makes everything okay." Sophie's lower lip trembled. "I thought you'd be honored." "Honored?" I stood up, my chair scraping loudly. "You want to honor me? Try not sleeping with my fiancé next time." "Ivy," my mother hissed, "people are staring." "Let them stare." I grabbed my purse. "I'm done pretending everything's fine." Eliana followed me outside. That was intense. It's about to get more intense. I showed her the contractor's schedule on my phone. They start tomorrow. "The renovation that Sophie thinks the sellers are doing?" "Exactly." She studied me for a long moment. "You know this won't make you feel better, right?" "Maybe not." I watched through the window as Sophie cried on our mother's shoulder. "But it'll make them feel worse." And right then, that was all that mattered. Eliana's birthday party felt like walking into a minefield. The backyard was filled with familiar faces, all pretending not to watch me as I navigated through the crowd. Eric squeezed my hand reassuringly. "We can leave any time," he whispered. "Not yet." I spotted Jamie by the drinks table, checking his phone with a worried expression. "This is getting interesting." Sophie waved from her seat of honor, surrounded by gift bags full of baby items. Trust her to hijack someone else's birthday party. "Ivy, come feel the baby kick." "I'm good." I grabbed a glass of wine, watching Jamie slip away to make another phone call. Eliana appeared beside me. "He's been doing that all afternoon. Sophie thinks he's handling work stuff." "Bookie stuff, more likely," I muttered. "What?" "Nothing." I forced a smile as my mother approached. "Ivy, darling, Sophie's about to open the presents. Come sit with us." "Actually," I raised my voice slightly, "I'd love to hear more about the house, Sophie. The renovations must be almost done." Sophie brightened. "Oh my God, yes. The contractors have been amazing. They're painting the nursery this gorgeous shade of lavender." "Contractors," Jamie interrupted, returning from his call. His face had gone pale. "What contractors? The ones doing the renovations before we move in?" Sophie frowned. "You said the sellers arranged everything." Jamie tugged at his collar. Right, of course." I sipped my wine, watching him squirm. He hadn't arranged anything, couldn't have, since he didn't own the house. I wondered how long he could keep up the lie. "Show everyone the nursery photos," Sophie urged. Jamie's phone rang again. "Sorry, I need to take this." I followed him around the corner of the house, staying just close enough to hear. "I know I'm late on the payment," he hissed into the phone. "The house fell through, okay? But I've got another plan." "No, please, just give me 2 more weeks." "Problems?" I stepped into view. He jumped, ending the call. "Jesus, Ivy, were you spying on me?" "Karma's a funny thing, isn't it?" I leaned against the wall. "One minute you're on top of the world, the next. What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," I smiled. "Just thinking about how quickly things can change. Houses slip away, debts pile up." His eyes narrowed. "What do you know?" "I know Sophie would be devastated to learn about your gambling. Almost as devastated as I was when, there you are." Sophie waddled around the corner. "What are you two talking about?" "The house," I said smoothly. "Jamie was just telling me about all the special features. The bay window, the vintage fireplace, the original hardwood floors. Isn't it perfect?" Sophie beamed. "We're so lucky. The master bedroom has this amazing crown molding." "That's being replaced," I cut in. Jamie's head snapped up. "What?" "Oh, you didn't know? The contractors are replacing all the crown molding. And the hardwood floors. And that vintage fireplace. Gone by Thursday." Sophie's face fell. But we chose that house because of those features." "Jamie, you said nothing was being changed." He shot me a panicked look. There must be some mistake." "No mistake." I pulled out my phone, showing them the contractor's latest photos. "See? They're making good progress." "But why would the sellers—" Sophie's voice trailed off as she studied the images. "Wait, that's not—" Jamie, that's not our house. Of course it is, he said quickly. It's just the angle. No, look at the address in the background. She zoomed in on one photo. That's the Victorian we lost. Why do you have renovation photos of a house we don't own? I watched the colour drain from Jamie's face as his house of cards began to collapse. Someone else bought it, he stammered. The loan. We couldn't. Then why are you acting like we're moving in? Sophie's voice rose. Why are there contractors? Why did you let me plan a housewarming party? Other guests were starting to stare. My mother hurried over. What's going on? I'd like to know that too, Sophie said, tears streaming down her face. Jamie? He opened his mouth, closed it, then turned and walked quickly toward his car. Jamie. Sophie tried to follow but stumbled. My mother caught her arm. What did you say to him? My mother demanded. I shrugged. Just the truth, for once. Sophie sank into a nearby chair, one hand on her stomach. I don't understand. We picked out paint colours. We measured for curtains. How could he lie about this? I caught Eric's eye across the yard. He nodded slightly, my cue to leave before the real storm hit. Happy birthday, Eliana, I called out, heading for the gate. Thanks for having me. Behind me, I could hear Sophie's sobs, my mother's soothing murmurs, and the growing whispers of gossip. Phase 1 was complete. Now for the real surprise. The contractor's boots echoed through the empty house as he showed me the progress. We've gutted the master bedroom and nursery as requested. The new fixtures arrive tomorrow. I ran my hand along the exposed beams, all that remained of Sophie's dream nursery. Perfect. And the timeline? We'll be done 2 days before their supposed move-in date. He checked his clipboard. Though I still don't understand why we're renovating exactly what they wanted to keep. Sometimes people don't know what they really want, I said, stepping over a pile of vintage crown molding. Until it's gone. My phone buzzed, Eliana calling. I answered on speaker while examining paint samples. Sophie's a mess, she said without preamble. Jamie finally came clean about the gambling. She's staying with your parents. How much does he owe? Enough that they're selling her engagement ring, the one he gave her after, I selected a deep charcoal for the master bedroom. Sophie hated dark colours. Karma's working overtime. This isn't funny, Ivy. She's pregnant and homeless. She's not homeless. She's at Mum and Dad's, probably being told how none of this is her fault. A crash from upstairs made me jump. The contractor shouted down, Sorry, just removing that built-in bookcase. Where are you? Eliana asked suspiciously. Working late. I hung up before she could ask more questions. The next morning, I arrived at work to find Denise waiting at my desk. You will not believe what I just heard. Try me. Jamie's been embezzling from the company. Small amounts, but it adds up. He thought he could gamble it back before anyone noticed. I set down my coffee. How much? Enough for prison time. She leaned closer. He's cleaning out his desk right now. I walked to the break room, timing it perfectly to refill my cup as Jamie packed his personal items into a cardboard box. Our eyes met across the room. Happy now? He asked quietly. Not yet. I know you're behind this somehow. He stepped closer. The house, the contractors, the audit that caught the missing money. Prove it. His hands clenched around his box. I loved you once, No, I corrected him. You loved what I could give you. Stability, status, a future. Then Sophie offered something more exciting. She needed me. And now, I gestured at his box. Does she still need you? An unemployed gambling addict with possible prison time. Security arrived before he could respond, escorting him out. I watched from my window as he loaded his box into his car, then pulled out my phone to check the contractor's latest update. The Victorian was transforming daily. Gone were the vintage details Sophie had swooned over, replaced by modern fixtures and stark colours. The garden she'd planned to plant was now a concrete patio. Eric texted, Saw Jamie being escorted out. You okay? Better than okay, I replied. Coming to see the house later. Someone should witness your descent into supervillainy. That evening, Eric walked through the renovation with me, shaking his head at each change. You're really going scorched earth with this. They wanted their dream home. I showed him the plans for the industrial-style kitchen, replacing Sophie's hoped-for farmhouse design. Dreams change. Speaking of changes, he pulled out his phone, showing me Sophie's latest social media post. A tearful announcement about postponing the housewarming due to unforeseen circumstances. Unforeseen, I scoffed. She should have seen everything coming the moment she decided to sleep with my fiancé. And what about your parents? They're caught in the crossfire. I remembered my mother's voice messages, all about supporting Sophie, understanding Sophie, forgiving Sophie. They chose their side. My phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. It was Jamie. Please, she's pregnant. Just tell me who bought the house. We can work something out. Still taking calls from your ex? Eric peered over my shoulder. Not for long. I blocked the number, then opened my email to approve the final renovation changes. You know, Eric said carefully, there's still time to stop this. Sell the house, take the profit, start fresh somewhere else. I walked to the bay window, the last original feature left. Tomorrow it would be replaced with floor-to-ceiling modern glass. They took everything from me, I said quietly. My future, my family, my trust. Now I'm taking something back. And after, when the house is done and they're broken, what then? Before I could answer, headlights swept across the window. A familiar car pulled into the driveway. Is that... Eric moved beside me. Sophie stepped out of her car, staring up at the house. My house, with tears streaming down her face. Showtime, I whispered, heading for the door. What are you doing here? I called from the porch, making Sophie jump. Ivy? She squinted through the darkness. Why are you in our house? Your house? I stepped into the light. That's interesting. Show me the deed. Sophie's hand went protectively to her stomach, her default move lately. The sellers never accepted your offer, I finished, because they'd already sold it to someone else. Understanding dawned slowly across her face. No, you didn't. I pulled out my keys, dangling them in the moonlight. Want a tour? She followed me inside, gasping at each renovation. The exposed brick she'd loved was now covered in sleek white paint. The vintage staircase had been replaced with modern floating steps. You're destroying it, she whispered. I'm making it mine. Eric hung back, watching us circle each other like wary cats. Sophie's eyes were red-rimmed, her designer dress wrinkled. Why? Her voice cracked. To hurt me? Why did you sleep with my fiancé? I countered. To hurt me. I loved him. I still love him, even after... She choked back a sob. Did you get him fired too? Jamie got himself fired, just like he got himself into gambling debt. He was trying to buy this house for us. She gestured at the gutted rooms. For our family. Your family? I laughed. You mean the family you built on the ruins of mine? Sophie sank onto a dusty contractor's stool. I never meant to fall in love with him, but you did, and instead of walking away, you took everything. I moved closer. My fiancé, my future, our parents' support. You took it all with a smile, then expected me to celebrate your happiness. Mom and Dad still love you. They tolerate me. They love you. The pregnant daughter, the victim, the one who needs protecting. Eric cleared his throat. Ivy, no. I turned back to Sophie. You want to know the best part? Jamie was planning to sell this house behind your back, to pay his debts. She shook her head. You're lying. Check his phone. Check the messages from his bookie. Ask him about the company money he stole. Sophie's face crumpled. Stop it. The perfect life you stole from me. It's falling apart, and I get to watch. I'm your sister. You stopped being my sister the moment you chose him over me. A loud crash from upstairs made us all jump. The contractor appeared at the top of the stairs. Sorry to interrupt, but we need to discuss the nursery demolition scheduled for tomorrow. Sophie stood up so quickly she stumbled. Eric caught her arm. You're destroying the nursery. Her voice was barely a whisper. "It's my house." I shrugged. "I can do whatever I want with it." She reached for her phone with shaking hands. "I'm calling Mom. Go ahead. Tell her how the sister she thinks is bitter and lonely actually owns your dream home. Tell her how your perfect husband is a thief and a gambler. Tell her everything." Instead of dialing, Sophie sank to the floor, sobbing. Eric shot me a concerned look. "Maybe we should get her out of my house. Good idea." But as I moved to help her up, Sophie grabbed my arm. "Please, we can fix this. All of it. I'll leave Jamie. I'll tell Mom and Dad the truth. Just, please don't take our home." For a moment, I wavered. She looked so small, so broken. My little sister, the one I'd protected since childhood. Then I remembered finding her in my bed with Jamie. Remembered her pregnancy announcement at my cancelled wedding venue. Remembered every family dinner where she played the victim while I was cast as the villain. "You're home." I stepped back. This was supposed to be my home. With Jamie. Before you took that future and made it yours. "Ivy, get out." When she didn't move, I raised my voice. "Get out!" Eric helped her up, guiding her toward the door. She paused in the doorway, one hand on her stomach. "You know what's worse than having something stolen from you?" she asked quietly. "Becoming the kind of person who enjoys stealing from others." The door closed behind them with a final click. I stood in my gutted house, listening to Sophie's car start up and drive away. My phone buzzed, a text from the contractor. "Nursery demolition still on for tomorrow." I stared at the message for a long moment, Sophie's words echoing in my head. Then I typed back, "Proceed as planned." Because some wounds run too deep for mercy. The morning of Sophie's housewarming party dawned bright and clear. I watched from my bedroom window as the bulldozer rolled up the driveway right on schedule. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing since dawn. First Eric, "Are you sure about this?" Then Eliana, "Sophie's decorating the house right now. She has no idea." Finally my mother, "Please don't do anything foolish today." I didn't respond to any of them. At exactly noon, cars began arriving. I recognized them all. Family, friends, colleagues. Sophie had invited everyone to witness her perfect life. "Ready?" Eric asked, appearing beside me. I straightened my blazer and grabbed the envelope from my desk. "Time to crash a party." We walked across the street just as Sophie was welcoming guests on the front porch. She froze when she saw me. "You're not supposed to be here." "Actually," I smiled, "you're not supposed to be here." The bulldozer's engine roared to life. Sophie spun around, her face draining of color as it approached the pristine front lawn. "What's happening?" My mother pushed through the crowd. "Ivy, what have you done?" I pulled the papers from my envelope. "I'm renovating my property." "Your—" Jamie appeared, looking haggard. "What do you mean, your property?" "She owns it." Eric's voice carried across the suddenly silent gathering. "She bought it months ago." Sophie swayed on her feet. But we signed the papers yesterday. The realtor—" "Show me." I held out my hand. "Show me these papers." Jamie stepped forward. "I have them right here." "No," Sophie interrupted. "You said you had them, but I never saw them. I never actually signed anything, did I?" The bulldozer inched closer to the freshly planted garden. "Jamie," Sophie's voice rose, "did you lie about the papers too?" He backed away. "I can explain." "Explain what?" I pulled out another document. "The gambling debts? The embezzlement? Or how you plan to sell this house, my house, to pay it all off?" Gasps rippled through the crowd. My mother pressed a hand to her chest. "That's not true," she whispered. "Jamie would never—" "Check his phone," I suggested. "Or better yet, ask his bookie." "He's right there." I pointed to a man hovering at the edge of the gathering, who quickly turned and hurried away. Jamie lunged for his car, but Eric blocked his path. "Running again?" "You did this," Jamie snarled at me. "You set me up." "No." I handed the eviction notice to Sophie. "You did this to yourself, just like you did this to her." Sophie stared at the paper, tears splashing onto the legal text. "All those renovations, You knew, the whole time. I bought this house the day after you announced your pregnancy. I turned to address the stunned crowd. The day I learned my sister and ex-fiancé had been sleeping together for months. Ivy, my mother stepped forward. This is cruel. Cruel, I laughed. Was it cruel when you told me to be happy for them? When you celebrated their betrayal? When you made me the villain for not forgiving them? The bulldozer's blade touched the first flower bed. Sophie screamed, "Stop it, please!" Why should I? I moved closer. You didn't stop when I begged you to, when I asked why my sister would do this to me. I'm sorry. She fell to her knees, sobbing. I'm so sorry, Ivy. Please don't destroy our home. It was never your home, I signaled the bulldozer driver. It was my future you destroyed. Now I'm just returning the favor. Jamie tried to run again, but 2 men in suits blocked his path. James Fletcher. One flashed a badge. We need to discuss some financial discrepancies at your former workplace. As they led Jamie away, Sophie crumpled the eviction notice in her fists. Where are we supposed to go? That's not my problem. I turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Sophie, don't name your baby after me. She deserves better than that. The crowd parted as I walked away, whispers following in my wake. I heard my mother calling my name, heard Sophie's sobs, heard the bulldozer's engine growling. Eric caught up with me at the sidewalk. Well, that was justified. I was going to say intense. He glanced back at the chaos we'd left behind. Feel better? I watched as my family's perfect facade crumbled, just like the house would soon crumble. Sophie being led away by our parents, Jamie in custody, the party guests fleeing the scene. Ask me tomorrow, I said, and walked away from the ruins of both our dreams. Behind me, the bulldozer began its work. The demolition dust had barely settled when Eliana found me sitting on my front porch, watching the sun set behind the partially destroyed Victorian. Everyone's looking for you, she said, settling beside me. Let them look. She handed me a cup of coffee. Jamie's being held without bail. Sophie's at the hospital. Stress triggered early contractions. The coffee burned my tongue, but I welcomed the pain. It felt real, grounding. Did you know, I said, that I used to imagine my whole life in this house? Sunday dinners, Christmas mornings, kids running up and down those stairs. And now? Now I'm going to sell it, as is. I gestured at the demolished garden, the exposed beams, the chaos I'd created. Let someone else build something new from the wreckage. My phone lit up, my mother calling again. This time I answered. Where are you? She demanded. Home. This isn't funny, Ivy. Your sister needs you. No, I said quietly. She doesn't, and neither do you. I hung up as Eric's car pulled into the driveway. He carried a box of my old photos, the ones I'd left at my parents' house. Your mum dropped these off at my place, he said. Think she was hoping to find you there. I pulled out a photo, Sophie and me as kids, matching Halloween costumes. We used to be inseparable. People change. No, I crumpled the photo. People reveal who they really are. Eliana's phone buzzed. She read the message, then looked at me carefully. Sophie lost the baby. The words hung in the air like the demolition dust. I waited to feel satisfaction, victory, something. Instead, I felt hollow. Ivy, Eric touched my arm. Talk to us. I wanted them to hurt like I hurt. I stared at the ruined house. But this isn't what I wanted. What did you want? I don't know anymore. Headlights swept across the lawn as another car approached. Sophie stepped out, looking pale and small in her hospital gown. You shouldn't be here, Eliana started, but Sophie held up a hand. I need to say something. I stood, facing my sister across the debris-strewn yard. She looked at the destruction around us, then back at me. I deserved this, she said softly. All of it. I destroyed your life because I was jealous. You had everything. The perfect fiancé, the perfect future. I wanted to prove I could take it all away. Sophie, let me finish. She wrapped her arms around herself. I told myself it was love, that Jamie and I were meant to be. But really, I just wanted to win. To be the sister everyone chose for once. They always chose you. No. She shook her head. They needed to take care of me because I was a mess. But you were the strong one, the successful one, the one they were proud of. I looked at the house, really looked at it, the demolished parts, the renovations, the ruins I'd created to make them suffer. I became exactly what they thought I was, I whispered, bitter, vengeful, cruel. We both did. Sophie wiped her eyes. I lost everything today. Jamie, the baby, our parents' trust. But the worst part, I lost you long before that, the day I decided my jealousy was more important than my sister. Eric and Eliana backed away, giving us space. In the growing darkness, Sophie and I stood among the ruins of both our lives. I can't forgive you, I said finally. I know. But I don't want to hate you anymore. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. What happens now? I looked at the bulldozer, still waiting for tomorrow's demolition, at the house that had become a monument to revenge rather than healing. Now, I said, we both start over, separately. Will you ever talk to me again? Maybe. Someday. When it doesn't hurt to look at you. She turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not because I got caught, or because everything fell apart, but because I broke something that can never be fixed. I watched her drive away, then turned to Eric and Eliana. Call the contractor. Tell him to stop the demolition. You're keeping the house? Eric asked. No. I took one last look at the Victorian, my dream home, my instrument of revenge, my prison of bitterness. I'm going to restore it, not for Sophie, not for revenge, but for me. Then I'm selling it and moving somewhere new. Running away? Eliana asked. No. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in months, moving forward, because sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction, it's rebuilding yourself from the ruins others left behind.
Charles's voice sliced through the kitchen clamor sharp as a cleaver. Cynthia, bring me some tea now. I paused, my hands submerged in soapy water. Wait, I'm doing the dishes. His tone was thick with disbelief and impatience. Stop that and bring me the tea quickly. Can't you follow simple orders? But I began, only to be interrupted again. What a useless wife you are. Make me some sweet coffee, please. This new demand came from Kelly, my mother-in-law, who was lounging in the living room, indulging in a slice of cake she had snagged from the fridge. Her eyes sparkled mischievously as she spoke. I sighed, my gaze falling on the mountain of dirty dishes. There are so many. Leave them for later. Just do what we say, useless wife. Charles's words echoed, each one a stinging lash. I am Cynthia, a 30-year-old working mother ensnared in a life that felt more like a dungeon than a sanctuary. I yearned for love and companionship, but instead, I found myself tethered to Charles and his imperious mother. Our 5-year-old son was the sole beacon of light in my otherwise dim existence. We resided in Charles's parental home, a setup I had reluctantly agreed to under the guise of caring for Kelly following my father-in-law's death. Initially, I sympathized with her, believing she was mourning. However, it didn't take long to see that I was merely a pawn in her twisted game of domestic dominance. No matter how diligently I cooked, cleaned, or worked, it was never enough. My efforts were consistently met with derision. My meals were either ignored or viciously critiqued. This sautéed vegetables and shrimp is so half-hearted, Kelly would sneer. Cook it properly from scratch. I'm busy and can only make simple things, I'd respond, striving to maintain my composure. That's why I hate backtalk from a daughter-in-law, she'd snap. Cook from scratch. Why don't you cook? Trapped in this relentless cycle of demands and disapproval, I longed for a change, yearning for a day when I could reclaim my life and find the peace that seemed so elusive. I hesitantly ventured a question one day, almost immediately regretting it. Then you're a good cook, right? Her reply was frosty and dismissive. Why would I do housework when you're here? Her words were like a slap, cold and calculated. Their cruelty deepened as time wore on. They stopped acknowledging my presence altogether, treating me as if I were a specter haunting my own home. Initially merely overlooked, I now felt utterly invisible. 6 years of living under this oppressive cloud passed respectively. Our son was growing up, but the oppressive atmosphere in the house remained unchanged. My mother-in-law, now 65, seemed to derive pleasure from my misery. One evening, as I trudged home from work, a heavy realization dawned on me. To them, my existence was meaningless. I felt like nothing more than a shadow, unnoticed and ignored, except by my son, whose recognition I cherished deeply. The thought of losing even that sliver of acknowledgement was unbearable. Upon arriving home, I began to cook immediately, trying to stave off the creeping sadness. I prepared Sichuan chili chicken, crispy fish fillets, and a beef and broccoli stir-fry, hoping to bring a semblance of normalcy to our dinner table. Suddenly, Charles broke his prolonged silence. "Bring me the mayo," he commanded abruptly. "Sure, here you are," I responded, handing him the mayonnaise. His first words to me in a long while were not words of thanks or even simple conversation, but yet another order. It was the final straw for me. The evening deteriorated further when Kelly commanded, "Clean the toilet, right now." I was stunned. "Yes, right now," she insisted, her tone dripping with venom. Unable to contain my frustration any longer, I protested, "Don't say such things while we're eating. It's disgusting, just like your heart." Her eyes narrowed and our argument escalated rapidly, with Charles jumping in, demanding that I apologize to his mother. But this time, I stood my ground. For the first time in years, I confronted them, and the conflict reached its peak, marking a turning point in my stifling existence. Faced with the relentless toxicity of my home life, I made a resolute decision to escape for both my son's future and my well-being. Retreating to my room with a newfound determination, I swiftly downloaded divorce papers, filled them out, and presented them to Charles. His face registered shock, but within me surged only a steadfast resolve. "I'm filing these," I declared, meeting his stunned gaze with unwavering certainty. For the first time, I felt as if I had stepped decisively out of the shadows and was ready to reclaim my life. In the days that followed my announcement, the household was rife with harsh stares and cutting remarks. Yet, amidst the turmoil, I experienced an unusual sense of liberation. One evening, while serving dinner, Kelly scrutinized the food with disdain. "You call this food? Even a child cooks better." I swallowed my frustration, focusing instead on my son's beaming smile. "Eat up, sweetheart. I made your favorite tonight," I encouraged him gently. Charles, never one to miss a chance for sarcasm, interjected, "Oh, now suddenly you're the perfect mother, huh? What a joke." Anger bubbled within me, but I maintained my composure. "I'm just trying to make a nice dinner for our son," I replied. Kelly scoffed. "Don't act like you're better than us. You're just a nuisance in this house." The tension at the dinner table was palpable as Charles's insults continued to fly. "So, Cynthia, have you ever thought about how you'll manage after the divorce? You can barely handle running a household, let alone your own life." I met his gaze squarely. "I've been supporting this family for years. I'm not worried about taking care of myself and our son." His smirk wavered, a flicker of unease crossing his face. Kelly quickly intervened. "Don't be ridiculous. You rely on us more than we rely on you." The conversation then turned to finances, a subject they usually avoided. "You know, without my paycheck, this household would struggle." My words were firm, reflecting my readiness to end my dependence on them and start anew. Speaking more to myself than to them, I voiced a harsh truth about their financial dependency. Kelly scoffed in response. "We'll manage. We don't need your charity." But Charles's silence was more telling than any words could be. He knew well that without my income, they would face significant difficulties. In the days that followed, the behavior of my in-laws grew increasingly erratic. Kelly oscillated between attempting to coax me into staying and hurling insults when I stood firm. Charles, on the other hand, seemed to retreat into himself, his usual confident air dissolving as he grappled with the reality of his financial dependence on me. One afternoon, I inadvertently overheard a conversation between them that sent chills through me. "Leaving her is not an option," Charles hissed under his breath, the tension in his voice. "We rely on her money." Kelly's reply was coldly strategic. "Don't fret, I have a plan. We'll make her life so miserable that she won't even think about leaving." Realizing their true intentions was a stark shock. They cared nothing for me or our son, seeing us only as pawns in their game of control and financial manipulation. That night, as I lay in bed, a resolution began to take shape in my mind. If they wanted a battle, I would give them one, but it wouldn't be fought with words. I planned to strike at their pride and their finances, where it would hurt the most. The next morning, I initiated my plan by contacting a lawyer, a sharp and astute woman. "I want a divorce," I declared, "and I want to ensure they don't get more than they deserve." She nodded resolutely, understanding the stakes. "We'll make sure of that. You've been the main provider, right? We'll use that." With each passing day, my resolve only hardened. I began meticulously documenting everything: the insults, their financial scheming, and even the minor grievances. It was time to hold them accountable, to make them face the consequences of their actions. I was no longer just surviving. I was fighting back, determined to reclaim my life and secure a better future for my son. As I compiled evidence, a newfound strength surged within me. For the first time in years, I felt a genuine sense of control over my life. The dark veil of disrespect was lifting, replaced by the promise of a fresh start. However, as the divorce proceedings commenced, the atmosphere at home became increasingly strained. Yet, with each passing day, my previous fears diminished, giving way to a solid sense of resolve. One evening, Kelly attempted a different tactic. "Cynthia, dear, why don't we forget all this unpleasantness? You know we're family," she suggested, her voice oozing insincerity. I met her gaze unflinchingly. "Family doesn't treat each other the way you've treated me," I replied. Charles, who had been quiet, scoffed dismissively. "Oh, now you're the victim. You're not as innocent as you pretend." Despite the rising anger within me, I remained composed. "I'm not pretending anything, Charles. I simply refuse to be your punching bag any longer." Inevitably, the conversation veered towards financial matters, as it often did. "You think you can just take our son and leave? How will you support him?" Charles challenged. I responded with calm confidence. "I've been supporting this family for years. I'll manage." Kelly's sneer was contemptuous. "You're nothing without us. You'll come begging to return." But their words no longer held sway over me. I understood my worth and grasped the truth about our situation. The following day, I met again with my lawyer, who laid out our strategy with precision. "We'll highlight their financial dependence on you. It'll be a key point in the custody battle and asset division." I nodded, feeling validated and supported by the law. The legal framework was on my side, and I was fully prepared to assert my rights. At home, tensions escalated to unprecedented levels. Kelly's attempts to belittle and intimidate me grew increasingly desperate. "You think you're clever," she hissed one evening, her tone venomous. Yet, standing in this turmoil, I was unshaken. I had seen their true colors, and I was ready to turn the page, armed with evidence, legal support, and a revitalized sense of self-worth. Facing Kelly's accusing glare, she uttered, But you're just abandoning your family. I met her gaze directly, my resolve clear. No, I'm finally standing up for myself, Charles chimed in, his voice seething with anger. You'll regret this. You can't survive without me. But his threats no longer held any power over me. I had moved beyond fear. As the court date loomed closer, I meticulously prepared for the legal battle ahead. I organized financial records, documented their spiteful comments, and compiled evidence of their neglect. One quiet afternoon, as I sorted through my papers, my son approached me, his voice tinged with uncertainty. Mom, are we going to be okay? I pulled him into a comforting embrace, my protectiveness for him surging. Yes, sweetheart, we're going to be just fine. We're leaving this place and starting a new, happy life, just you and me. His arms tightened around me, and at that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that I was doing the right thing. I was not just fighting for myself, but for my son's future. The day of the court hearing finally arrived, bringing with it a mix of dread and anticipation. I felt ready to face Charles and Kelly, to put an end to their control and abuse. I was determined to reclaim my life and secure the peace and happiness my son deserved. It was a day for justice, and I was committed to seeing it through. Sitting across from Charles and Kelly in the courtroom, a surreal mix of emotions washed over me. This was the moment of change. As the proceedings kicked off, Charles's lawyer portrayed him as a devoted husband and father, unfairly accused. Kelly cast herself as a grieving mother-in-law, mistreated by an ungrateful daughter-in-law. Yet, armed with my evidence and strengthened by my resolve, I was prepared to reveal the truth and start anew. Their performance was see-through, their falsehoods glaring. When it came to my turn to address the court, I spoke with clarity and composure. For years, I have been the sole breadwinner for this family, while my husband's unemployment and his mother's manipulative tactics have only added to our difficulties. Charles interrupted, feigning injury. Cynthia, how can you say these things? I faced him squarely, my look unwavering. Support isn't just about words, Charles. It's measured by actions, and yours have been nothing but selfish and cruel. The judge listened intently as I laid out my case, presenting financial records, audio recordings of their verbal attacks, and testimonials from neighbors who had observed their conduct firsthand. The evidence accumulated, and with each piece, Charles's pretense fell apart, and Kelly's composed facade cracked, revealing her true disposition. The courtroom hushed, the air thick with tension. Then, my lawyer delivered the clinching evidence, a series of photographs and documents that not only confirmed Charles's infidelity, but also Kelly's secret affair with a neighbor, Jacob. The courtroom erupted in murmurs as the images were displayed, exposing their duplicity for everyone to see. Charles's eyes widened in disbelief, while Kelly's face contorted with anger. "You violated our privacy!" she shrieked, her voice slicing through the murmurs. Calmly, I met her furious gaze. "No, I merely uncovered the truth, a truth both of you have tried too long to conceal." The judge had to call for order, but the damage to their standing was irreversible. Their credibility was shattered, their deceptions laid bare. As the hearing concluded, the judge's ruling was unequivocal. I was awarded full custody of our son, and the assets were divided equitably. Charles and Kelly were left with nothing but their sullied reputations. Walking out of the courtroom, I felt an immense weight lift from my shoulders. The years of manipulation and mistreatment were finally behind me. I had stood up to them, and I had prevailed. This victory wasn't just for me, it was for my son's future, and for the new life that lay ahead of us, free from the shadows of deceit and control. The most triumphant moment, however, came just outside the courthouse. My son ran to me, his face lit up with relief. "We did it, Ma," he exclaimed joyfully. "Yes, we did," I replied, embracing him tightly. "We're free now. This is just the beginning for us." As we walked away together, I felt a profound sense of victory. This win wasn't just for me, it was for anyone who has ever felt diminished or powerless. It was a victory for truth and fairness, marking the start of a new chapter filled with hope and promises of a better future. The impact of the court's decision was immediate and tumultuous. News of Charles and Kelly's deceit spread rapidly, tarnishing their reputations within our tight-knit community. They could no longer maintain their facade of respectability. In the days following the verdict, I concentrated on rebuilding my life with my son, but I couldn't help feeling gratified knowing that Charles and his mother were finally facing the consequences of their actions. One evening, while I was preparing dinner, an unexpected visitor appeared at my door. Hannah, Jacob's wife. Her eyes brimming with tears, she managed to say, "Cynthia, I've heard everything. I can't believe what Kelly did," her voice shaking with emotion. I invited her in and offered her a cup of tea. As we sat at the kitchen table, she shared her heartache. I trusted her as a neighbor, as a friend, and to think she was having an affair with my husband. I listened and offered comfort, realizing the extensive damage Kelly's actions had caused beyond my troubles. The next day, I encountered Charles in town. He looked defeated, merely a shadow of his former self. His previous arrogance vanished. I stopped, facing him squarely. "What's left to say, Charles?" He shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. "I'm sorry for everything," he murmured. These interactions underscored the profound changes that had taken place, not just in my life but in the lives of those around us. The truth had liberated more than just my son and me. It had begun to mend the fabric of our community, torn by deceit and betrayal. Charles' late apology revealed his newfound recognition of just how much he had depended on my strength. "I didn't realize how much I relied on you," he admitted. This confession marked a significant power shift. He had lost everything: his pride, his home, his family, and it was only in this profound loss that he truly acknowledged his mistakes. However, it was Kelly who faced the most severe repercussions. Her affair with Jacob had not only destroyed her reputation, but also led to serious legal challenges. Hannah had filed for divorce and was suing her for alienation of affection, adding a legal stain to her scandal. The whispers and rumors that floated through our neighborhood painted a vivid picture of Kelly's downfall, portraying a woman toppled by her misdeeds. She had become an outcast, shunned by those she once considered friends. One afternoon, I encountered her at the grocery store. Her demeanor was subdued, a stark contrast to the commanding presence she once held. As she navigated the aisles quickly, trying to avoid attention, our paths crossed. Our eyes met briefly, and the resentment and defeat in her gaze were unmistakable. "You did this to me," she hissed as she moved past. Watching her retreat, I felt a complex mix of pity and vindication. "No, Kelly, you did this to yourself," I whispered to myself. The tables had indeed turned, and the consequences of their actions were now inescapable. Charles and Kelly were both reaping the outcomes of their years of deceit and manipulation. Seeing them struggle, I realized that the best form of revenge was simply living well, free from the toxicity that had once overshadowed my life. As I refocused on my son and our fresh start, I understood that this journey was not merely about revenge but about freedom, breaking free from the cycles of abuse and control that had confined us. Looking forward, filled with a sense of hope and liberation, I knew that the best was yet to come. This new chapter wasn't just a turn of fate, it was a well-earned beginning, promising a future bright with possibility and devoid of the shadows that once loomed so large. Hello, my name is Mary, and I'm currently involved in a collaborative effort with my husband, Samuel, at his family-owned business. The enterprise, led by my father-in-law, Liam, is a cozy and welcoming small-scale company with a workforce of about 6 individuals. Liam, a man known for his reticence, rarely engages in the daily business activities. Instead, it's Samuel who's likely to be the next president, showing his commitment by tirelessly engaging with clients and driving forward new projects, which underscores his dedication to the growth of the company. During major initiatives, all employees unite, fostering a dynamic and passionate environment. I've been part of this vibrant setting for the last 8 years, since marrying into the family. However, my mother-in-law, Amanda, seems to have some reservations about my involvement. Just recently, when I returned home early to prepare dinner while Samuel stayed late at the office, Amanda confronted me with some harsh words. "How long do you plan on clinging to our family business?" she questioned, her tone laden with reproach. Since retiring, Amanda seemed to shift her focus to critiquing my choices instead of enjoying her newfound free time. In response, I maintained my composure and asked, "What do you mean by clinging?" Amanda, cutting in her reply, insinuated that my marriage to Samuel was more out of necessity, and now I was exploiting the opportunity to work at their company. This wasn't the first time such accusations had been thrown my way, and it was becoming a frequent occurrence. When I married, I chose to leave my previous job to join Samuel's family business. It was a personal choice, not driven by unemployment, as Amanda appeared to believe. Attempting to clarify, I said, "Mom, it's not that I couldn't work elsewhere. I chose to be here." But her dismissive response showed a clear misunderstanding, as she seemed convinced of her perceived insights into my motives. The tensions with my mother-in-law didn't just stop at words. Despite her promises to take over household management upon her retirement, she refrained from contributing, leaving Liam to often seek her help with domestic chores. Instead, she stubbornly declared, "I've worked all my life. Now it's the daughter-in-law's turn to handle the household duties." Thus, the responsibility frequently landed on me to manage the dinner preparations and the subsequent cleanup. One afternoon, I gathered my courage to discuss a household issue that had been weighing on me. "Amanda," I began hesitantly, "I've noticed that dishes often remain unwashed in the sink. It would help if you could tidy up after your meals." My cautious approach, however, only ignited a fiery reaction from her. She lashed out, accusing me of overstepping my boundaries and questioning my right as a daughter-in-law to impose rules in her home. Caught in this draining exchange, I was conscious of the time slipping away. If I didn't start dinner soon, our meal would be delayed significantly. Despite my growing frustration, I managed to maintain my calm. "Mom, let's continue this conversation later," I suggested, hoping to momentarily ease the tension and turn my attention to preparing dinner, as it seemed likely we would eat late tonight. Amanda, seemingly cooled by my proposal, withdrew to the living room, leaving me alone with my thoughts amidst the sounds of clattering kitchen utensils. Both Liam and Samuel were no strangers to Amanda's abrasive treatment towards me. They tried to intervene whenever they witnessed it, although their attempts seemed to have little impact. Each time they addressed the issue, their expressions showed deep concern and frustration, reflecting their earnest desire to foster harmony within our family dynamic. Ironically, whenever Liam and Samuel admonished Amanda for her behavior, it only redirected her anger towards me, intensifying her hostility. Her usual calm and gentle demeanor would twist into contempt, her tone slicing deeper than ever. Though I had never endured physical violence, the emotional impact of Amanda's words was profound. The support from Liam and Samuel was my refuge, helping me to somewhat withstand Amanda's biting remarks. That support was tested on one particularly difficult morning. After cleaning up from breakfast and preparing to leave for work amidst the morning rush, Amanda suddenly exclaimed, "Oh my, what a mess! A trash heap here!" and without any warning, she doused my handbag with a bucket of water. I stood frozen, a mix of shock and anger rendering me speechless. "What are you doing, Amanda?" I managed to utter, my voice trembling with disbelief. Amanda's response was dismissively flippant, akin to that of a mischievous child. "Oh, was that your stuff? I thought it was just a big piece of trash." Her casual dismissal only fueled my fury. "Even if you thought it was trash, who pours water on it?" I protested, struggling to understand her callous disregard. In the morning light illuminating our living room, I found myself sitting opposite Amanda, her expression icy and determined as though she had resolved to take a drastic step. "What kind of reasoning is that? Now the carpet is soaked, and what about the vacuum cleaner?" My words tumbled out, mingled with confusion and frustration, as I hurriedly removed the water-soaked items from my bag, important documents for work laid out on the table to dry. Amanda looked back at me with a chilling nonchalance, her face betraying neither remorse nor concern for the upheaval she'd caused. "You don't need to go to work anymore," she stated flatly. I was utterly baffled by her declaration. "Excuse me?" My reply was heavy with disbelief and shock. Amanda's next words felt like a sharp stab to my heart. "You've been clinging to this house for 8 years, but today I can finally get rid of you." Her voice was filled with a venom and resolve I had never witnessed in her before. My mind spun, sorrow swelling within me. "Getting rid of me?" I echoed, disbelief coloring my tone. "She made me feel like an utter outsider in this family. My daughter is joining the company, so we need you to leave. Today's your last day. All you have to do today is bow your head to your father-in-law and Samuel, apologizing for all the trouble you've caused." Her mocking laughter added salt to my wounds. She was leveraging my position at work to oust me. I had poured years into that job, building both respect and cherished memories. Shocked and heartbroken, I struggled to grasp the harshness of her decree. I had committed myself to this family, yet it seemed my sacrifices were meaningless to her. "Are you sure about this? Wasn't Emma working in a clothing store in Philadelphia?" I questioned, my voice reflecting my confusion and concern. My role was more than just a paycheck. It was my path to personal fulfillment. Meanwhile, Emma, my sister-in-law, apparently weary of city life and its impersonal interactions, had decided to return. She said she was tired of dealing with the cold people of Philadelphia, so I told her once she comes back home, I have a job ready for her, Amanda explained with a finality that left little room for argument. Amanda's words struck like a harsh winter gust. "She's agreed to come back immediately, and now that she is, I want you out of this house." Her declaration was staggering, almost impossible to grasp. With a single sweeping decision, she was prepared to uproot my life, completely disregarding my role within the family. Without a chance for any discussion, she coldly presented me with an envelope. "I've written your resignation letter," she announced, effectively banishing me from our home. At that moment, my heart shattered. Years of dedication and togetherness were dismissed as trivial, like a discarded piece of paper. Her actions tore at the fabric of our family bond, leaving it irreparably damaged. With a heavy heart, I made the short 5-minute walk to the company, a path I had trodden countless times, but never with such a tumult of emotions under the cool morning sky. Each step felt laden with the gravity of the unfolding situation. Upon entering the office, I shared with my father-in-law Liam and my husband Samuel, I relayed Amanda's harsh ultimatum. Their expressions blended shock with restrained anger, yet they remained composed. Amidst the turmoil, they tentatively suggested that perhaps it was time for me to step away, to demonstrate to Amanda the real impact of her demands. This idea plunged my heart into further chaos. After years of relentless work at our family business, the notion of taking a break, longer than the brief holidays of Thanksgiving or Christmas, felt both alien and enormous. Encouraged by Samuel and Liam's supportive words, "Why don't you spread your wings for a change?" I resolved to take a short trip. As I packed, my mind was awash with reflections on my life, the choices I had made, and what the future might hold. Meanwhile, my sister-in-law Emma, who was supposed to replace me at the company, arrived shockingly late at 2 p.m. Her lackadaisical approach left Samuel and Liam bewildered and frustrated. Despite their efforts, Emma showed little interest in grasping the intricacies of the business. Hearing of this, a wave of anxiety washed over me concerning the company's future, even as I looked forward to my journey. Departing without another encounter with Amanda, I quickly set off. As the train pulled away, I gazed out at the shifting landscape, allowing myself to reflect on my past and present. The journey offered not just a physical distance, but a moment to breathe and consider the path laid out before me. As I savored the local seafood specialties during my journey, my thoughts often drifted to my family and our business. I was deeply engrossed in these reflections on the 5th day of my retreat when my serenity was abruptly disrupted by a tearful call from Emma. "What's going on? Mom said it was an easy job just sitting in a chair, but Samuel and Dad are acting like I can't do anything right," she lamented. Her words, likely echoing the assurances given by my mother-in-law, caught me off guard. Despite the leisurely pace of my days, I knew it was time to address the reality of the situation. "So, Emma, how proficient are you with computers?" I inquired, sensing her hesitation. "Well, I usually watch videos online and play games too," she responded, her answer hinting at her limited technical expertise. Curious about her capabilities, I probed further into her familiarity with software tools like Word or Excel. Her puzzled response was unexpected, considering her background in the Philadelphia apparel industry, where tasks like tracking sales and managing inventory would have necessitated basic computer skills. "Can you handle calculations for sales or fill out documents?" I asked. She confidently claimed I could handle that task. However, when pressed with a more specific query, "Can you calculate the right amount of tax?" her confidence faltered and she responded with uncertainty. This was not merely a test of her mathematical skills, but of her ability to apply them in a practical business setting. While Emma might have other talents, it was clear that she was unsure about the skills required for the job. Her discomfort seemed especially pronounced when it came to calculations, likely contributing to the criticism from Liam and Samuel. It was crucial to confront the motives of my mother-in-law and her supporters who sought to oust me. "Since you're taking over my role, I expect you to manage the accounting tasks proficiently. Be mindful of email etiquette. A casual tone that might be suitable for friends is entirely inappropriate for business communications. Also, you'll be responsible for scheduling staff shifts. Our team is small, but we take everyone's requests for time off seriously, so ensure not to prioritize your convenience over theirs," I advised her firmly. As I continued to outline the responsibilities, I could hear Emma sobbing on the other end of the line. It was a tough conversation, but necessary to ensure she understood the reality and the expectations of the role she was stepping into. "But I thought I wouldn't have to do much." Emma abruptly ended the call, clearly overwhelmed by the tasks at hand. Over the next 4 days, I took the opportunity to explore Philadelphia, the very place Emma had escaped from. Surprisingly, I found the people there warmer than expected, a stark contrast to the cold-hearted nature of my mother-in-law, Amanda, and Emma, who seemed intent on pushing me out. A week after leaving my job, I returned to my in-laws' house. As soon as I arrived, Amanda, her face red with fury, confronted me. "How dare you make my daughter cry? You won't get away with this," she yelled, her eyes filled with anger and confusion. Before she could reach me, Samuel and Liam intervened, trying to calm her down, Though her anger showed no signs of easing, Emma is upset because she got a scolding for trying to boss around her employees, despite not knowing how to properly do it. It's not Mary's fault. Besides, Mary hasn't been here for a week, so she couldn't have upset Emma, Samuel explained, his voice calm yet firm, trying to dispel the baseless accusations. Amanda shot back emotionally. It's because of her. This woman is the reason for Emma's troubles. She threw suspicions at me without any real basis. Where is Emma, by the way? I asked, scanning the room, but she was nowhere to be found, deepening the mystery. It's odd Emma has nowhere else to go since she gave up her apartment in Philadelphia. I assumed she'd be here, I pondered aloud. Samuel then shared, Emma's locked herself in her room. She's been crying and doesn't want to go to work anymore. She's overwhelmed, likely because she lacks the skills needed for the job. Amanda, still heated, accused, You've been turning Samuel and Liam against me. They wouldn't say the company runs better with you than with Emma unless you poison them against her. Samuel sighed deeply, clearly tired from the ongoing family drama and his futile attempts to clear up misunderstandings. Mom, he began again, hoping to clarify. It might sound unusual, but Mary is exceptional at her work. She's certified in bookkeeping, her secretarial skills are top-notch, and she's even studied Spanish and studied abroad. She handles all our multilingual communications at the company, he said with a hint of pride. Amanda looked surprised, obviously unaware of my qualifications and contributions. That sounds like something out of a TV show, she muttered. Reflecting, I shared, in college, I was so focused on getting various certifications and immersed in my studies that I hardly had time for social activities or romance. It was then that I met Samuel when he visited my company for business, and I found myself recounting the story of how we first met, trying to bridge the gap between the misunderstandings and the reality of our lives. However, I realized Amanda wasn't interested in hearing about my qualifications or past achievements, so I steered the conversation back to the present situation. In a nutshell, I handled a wide range of tasks at the company, from accounting and scheduling to liaising with other companies and managing employee shifts, I explained, outlining the broad scope of my responsibilities. Samuel added, The work environment has been much better compared to when you were more involved, Mom. His comment left Amanda visibly surprised. Just then, Liam, Samuel's father, interjected with a surprising revelation. We're considering shutting down the company soon. Emma made a significant mistake. Instead of preparing some documents, she chose to handle phone calls because she thought it would be more fun. While we were away, she ended up being rude to an important contact from another company, which could have serious repercussions. I was stunned, covering my mouth with my hand in shock. I can't believe Emma would do something like that, I murmured, filled with disbelief and dread at the thought of how her actions could potentially lead to the company's downfall. However, as I was absorbed in these anxious thoughts, the story took another unexpected turn. When I explained our situation, the president of the other company suggested it might be time to consider merging. He expressed interest in absorbing our family business, Liam continued. This was an unforeseen yet hopeful development. A merger could stabilize our customer base, something Samuel had been striving towards through his diligent efforts in sales. This news brought a sense of relief to Samuel and Liam, but not to Amanda. Suddenly she objected, That's not acceptable. Samuel must become the president. This company is ours, isn't it? He's not going to be just an employee, Amanda exclaimed passionately, unable to accept the possibility of losing the prestige associated with owning a company. Her outburst caught the attention of Emma, who came downstairs to see what the commotion was about. Amidst the chaos, Liam spoke up with a calm but decisive tone. I am divorcing you. You've not only resisted change and neglected your duties at home and to the family, but I've also learned of your escapades with younger men. I can't support such behavior any longer. This announcement was a shock to everyone, especially Samuel and me. Liam then took out some divorce papers and a photo of Amanda with a young man from a shelf in the living room, placing them on the table. If you sign these divorce papers now and take your belongings, I won't pursue alimony. Trying to get any money from you would be pointless, he stated firmly. How can you say that? Haven't I devoted myself to this house all these years? Amanda protested. Have you done any real housework in the last 8 years? Does spending someone else's money on young men count as devotion to this house? Liam countered, his voice revealing a rare frustration. This was the first time we saw such a stern side of Liam, usually mild-mannered as he addressed the deep-seated issues that had been simmering within the family. In the tumultuous family drama, the sight of Liam, usually so composed and restrained, visibly upset, was a shock to everyone, especially Emma, who had just entered the living room. Her body shook slightly, a clear sign of her astonishment and fear. "Emma, this involves you two," Liam declared, his voice firm and resolute. "You came back because you failed to make it on your own in Philadelphia. Now you can't even manage to secure a job here, yet you parade around as if you're above everyone. Ultimately, you've stopped trying to work at all. It seems you've picked up some bad habits of escapism. It's time for you to leave this house as well." Emma was stunned, her face a mix of confusion and denial. "Wait a minute, Dad. Maybe Mom has her issues, but I'm still your daughter, right?" she protested, her voice desperate as she tried to cling to her place in the family hierarchy. Amanda, feeling the sting of her daughter's words, expressed her shock. "Are you betraying me now, Emma?" she accused, her voice tinged with hurt and disbelief. As tensions escalated, Liam quickly intervened to prevent further conflict. "To avoid more trouble, I've arranged for you both to stay with an acquaintance until you find your footing again. They will be here shortly to pick you up. Please get your essential belongings ready," he instructed, his tone leaving no room for argument. With heavy hearts and no other viable options, Amanda and Emma packed their belongings. Shortly after, an acquaintance of Liam, who managed a factory with living accommodations, arrived to escort them to their new temporary home. In the meantime, Samuel, Liam, and I took the opportunity to inform our employees about the impending merger of our company with a larger corporation, preparing them for the changes and new challenges ahead. Amid these significant life adjustments, I discovered that I was pregnant. I shared the joyous news with the president of the company acquiring ours, who responded enthusiastically and promised to arrange a suitable replacement for my position, ensuring a smooth transition. With the promise of new beginnings and the anticipation of our growing family, Samuel and Liam dedicated themselves even more passionately to their work, inspired by the bright future ahead. After deciding to marry my boyfriend Raymond, I excitedly planned a visit to his family's home for formal introductions. On the designated day, however, I faced an unexpected and harsh rejection from his relatives. Their stern directive was clear: never reach out to us again. Your voice is unwelcome. It became apparent that their vanity and pride in their physical appearance had bred a culture of coldness and jealousy towards anyone who possessed qualities they lacked. Unfortunately, I became the unwitting victim of their envy, with even Raymond's father and brother tacitly endorsing this dismissive stance. As time passed, I managed to craft a clever retaliation against them. Now, at 29, I find myself enjoying peaceful, joyful days surrounded by my husband's love, our cherished child, and the unwavering support of my parents. This happiness dates back 4 years to when I was 25, a time marked by the beginning of my relationship with Raymond, who was then a colleague and eventually became my partner. Raymond won me over with his kindness and universal likability. Known at work for his aversion to conflict and forgiving nature, he quickly became a central figure in my life. His proposal came after many shared interests and countless movie dates, which had turned our work friendship into a blossoming romance. His proposal filled me with immense joy, and without hesitation, I agreed to marry him, eager to support his ambitions, including his dream of starting his own business. The following weekend, Raymond and I visited my family to share our engagement news. Raymond charmed my parents effortlessly, bonding with my father over drinks and engaging in conversations. My parents, taken with Raymond's warm and affable nature, joyfully welcomed him into the family. Observing Raymond integrate so seamlessly into my family dynamics confirmed how right we were for each other. Our next step was to meet Raymond's family, about whom I knew very little. As we prepared for this encounter, I couldn't have anticipated the stark contrast in reception that awaited us. Dismissing any doubts, I assumed Raymond's independence might have resulted in sporadic contact with his family. The evening before our visit, during a relaxed phone conversation, Raymond hinted, "My parents might seem a bit odd, but don't worry about it too much." His words stirred a slight anxiety within me, but with the night approaching, I decided to put my concerns to rest and went to bed around 11 p.m. The next day, Raymond and I renewed our spirits at the train station and set off together to his family home. It was my first visit to his ancestral residence, and despite my efforts to remain calm, a nagging unease persisted. As we walked, Raymond's voice became a distant murmur against the rapid beating of my heart. Ahead stood a grand mansion, like something out of a fairy tale, with a vast garden that added to my nervous anticipation about the life Raymond had led in such luxurious surroundings. His comforting smile briefly eased my worries as he asked, "Feeling nervous? It's all right, let's go in." We were greeted warmly by my mother-in-law at the grand entrance. Her graceful presence and impeccable style radiated elegance, momentarily alleviating my anxiety. Inside, except for my mother-in-law, the rest of the family welcomed me with reserved smiles, which somewhat relaxed my initial discomfort. I was soon drawn into the living room for a pleasant dinner conversation, and we proudly announced our engagement. The family, especially my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, showed genuine excitement about welcoming me into their fold, saying, "We're thrilled to have such a charming addition to our family." Their warm reception deeply touched me, fostering a sense of belonging. As the evening unfolded, I engaged more with Raymond's relatives. His father, who managed a successful company specializing in package tours, and his brother, an executive with aspirations of leadership, both shared intriguing aspects of their careers. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, both homemakers, enriched their lives with pursuits like dance and flower arranging. My sister-in-law, with her impeccable style and confidence, made a particularly strong impression. My father-in-law's kindness and engaging demeanor further soothed any lingering nerves. His interest in my career led to a conversation where I shared that I was permanently employed at the same company as Raymond, having joined right after graduating from Harvard University. His evident pride and admiration as he commended my accomplishments were deeply reassuring. The praise from him and Raymond left me feeling embraced and valued within this new family circle. I felt a mix of slight embarrassment and deep gratitude as Raymond's family showered me with words of support and admiration. My journey to achieving this recognition was not easy. It took me to a prestigious university in the United States, where I sacrificed countless nights of sleep to excel in my studies. During my high school years, my parents worked tirelessly, despite their limited means, to afford my college education. Fueled by a strong determination to succeed and eventually repay my parents for their sacrifices, I dedicated myself fully to every endeavor. As we engaged in lively dinner conversation, I suddenly noticed a drop in chatter from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. A wave of apprehension washed over me, urging me to shift the conversation. Noticing a beautiful floral arrangement on the table, I complimented it, only to be met with a sharp retort from my mother-in-law. She questioned the sincerity of my interest in what she called housewives' pastimes, given my professional background. Confused by her sudden change of tone, I struggled to understand the hostility. Echoing her sentiments, my sister-in-law hinted that my academic achievements might lead me to view their hobbies as trivial. I had never intended to imply such a thing and found myself speechless, fighting back tears of frustration. Raymond quickly stepped in, defending my character and rebuking their unfounded assumptions. His intervention brought me some comfort, but I remained quiet, my eyes cast downward. I noticed my father-in-law, who had been drinking since noon, now sleeping on the sofa, and my brother-in-law, disinterestedly scrolling through his phone. The tension in the room was palpable. Sensing this, Raymond tactfully suggested we end the gathering, offering a much-needed escape from the stifling atmosphere. As we headed back to the station, Raymond apologized for the day's events, explaining, "I'm sorry about today. My mom and sister are quite proud and sensitive about their educational background." He later shared that his mother-in-law had started working at a flower shop right after high school, where his father-in-law first fell for her, captivated by her beauty, which drew many customers. His persistent pursuit eventually led to their marriage, with him still deeply enamored by her. Similarly, his sister-in-law had reconnected with Raymond's brother-in-law at a high school reunion. Enchanted by her transformation, he pursued her relentlessly until they became a couple, much like his father-in-law, who seemed to acquiesce to his wife's wishes unquestionably. Despite my advanced education, I found it hard to fully grasp their insecurities. They were both attractive women with devoted husbands who adored and protected them. However, I couldn't shake off a lingering sense of unease, questioning whether a marriage would truly be as harmonious as I had envisioned. Nonetheless, with the family's blessings now seemingly secured, I hope for a smoother path ahead. We move forward with our wedding plans, fueled by the hope that open communication could bridge any divides between our families. "Rest assured, Nancy, I'll always stand by your side," Raymond reassured me, injecting a dose of optimism into our preparations. After months of meticulous planning, the day before our wedding was suddenly disrupted by an unexpected phone call from Raymond's mother. As Raymond's voice rose in disbelief, I listened in shock to his revelation that his parents had decided not to attend our wedding, citing a previously booked trip for the same day. Stunned and bewildered by this unforeseen development, we tried to contact them for an explanation, but our efforts were met only by the incessant ringing of unanswered calls. Perplexed by the sudden change, we hurried to Raymond's parents' house, only to find it dark and seemingly abandoned, an indicator of their absence. I shared my concerns with Raymond, recalling the tense atmosphere during my previous visit and wondering if I had inadvertently offended his mother and sister. Raymond attributed their behavior to their prideful nature, acknowledging that highly intelligent individuals often display stubborn tendencies. However, he remained unsure of any specific grievances they might have held. Puzzled by his father's absence as well, Raymond noted that both his father and brother-in-law tended to defer to their wives, likely aligning with them to avoid conflict. His distress was palpable, leaving me at a loss for words. Ultimately, our attempts to contact Raymond's family proved futile, and we were compelled to proceed with the wedding without their presence. We were left bewildered by the unfolding events, struggling to understand why they would prioritize a trip over their son's wedding. My parents showed understanding, yet their expressions hinted at their complexities, burdening me with guilt for causing them distress on what should have been a joyous occasion. During the reception, whispers circulated among our guests about Raymond's parents' absence. Even our boss, who graciously offered a toast, inquired about their whereabouts, leaving us grappling for an appropriate response. Faced with the dilemma of revealing the truth, we opted to deflect inquiries by attributing their absence to illness. What was meant to be a day of celebration turned into one fraught with mental exhaustion. Days later, when Raymond and I visited his parents to relay the events of the ceremony, his mother's nonchalant demeanor and lack of remorse cut deeply. Suppressing my sadness to maintain familial harmony, I responded with a strained smile, concealing the hurt that lingered within me. Raymond's voice, filled with a mix of disbelief and frustration, echoed through the room as he confronted the situation. Canceling the day before the wedding with all our relatives absent, is that even acceptable? If you had no intention of attending, you shouldn't have accepted the invitation. From the outset, his sister-in-law's harsh words only intensified the tension. I would have attended if Nancy wasn't the bride, she stated coldly, leaving me spinning in confusion. Before I could even begin to digest her words, Raymond's mother launched into her tirade, trying to shift the blame onto me. Don't lay all the blame on us. I wanted to witness my son's special day, but Nancy, you ruined it. I'm a victim here too. I demand an apology, she declared. Raymond, sensing my astonishment, quickly came to my defense. How can you blame Nancy? She's done nothing wrong, he argued, his voice filled with disbelief. The room fell eerily silent until Raymond's father-in-law spoke up. His voice, heavy with anger, sent chills through the room. Enough is enough. How dare you barge in here on our day off to complain? Is that all you came for? Get out! His harsh words felt like a physical blow, and before we could fully grasp the situation, we were being pushed out of the house. As I hurriedly put on my shoes at the entrance, my mind was overwhelmed with shock and disbelief. Suddenly, a sharp pain in my foot caused me to cry out. Lifting my foot, I discovered a caterpillar wriggling inside my shoe. Recoiling in disgust, I kicked off the shoe and dashed outside, releasing the caterpillar into the fresh air. Standing there, with one shoe on, I caught my breath and noticed my mother-in-law and sister-in-law watching from the doorway, their laughter tinged with malice. Are you all right? They asked, their feigned concern sounding hollow. Eager to leave the uncomfortable scene, I mumbled an apology and quickly left, only to be stopped by my mother-in-law's cutting remark. Nancy, please refrain from involving yourself in our affairs, except for weddings and funerals, she said, her tone final as she closed the door behind me. I was left bewildered and deeply hurt. What had I done to deserve such treatment? All I had wanted was to build a positive relationship with Raymond's family. On the journey home, Raymond showered me with apologies, assuring me that I wouldn't have to endure further interactions with his family. Despite his comforting words, I couldn't shake off the feelings of guilt and confusion. The realization that my mere presence had sparked such disdain from his mother and sister-in-law weighed heavily on me, making me question my place and worth. The next day brought a new wave of distress. My entire body erupted in intense itching. Rushing to the mirror, I saw fiery red swellings covering my skin. A visit to the dermatologist confirmed that the cause was caterpillar stings from the previous day. The relentless itching made sleep elusive for weeks, compounding the unsettling memories of that confrontational visit to Raymond's house. Amidst the ongoing troubles, I observed my brother-in-law tampering with my shoes at the front door, an act that deepened my growing distrust towards Raymond's family. Just when I thought our situation couldn't deteriorate further, Raymond fell ill and was hospitalized with severe stomach pains, later diagnosed as a suspected gastric ulcer. Consumed with worry, I insisted he take time off work, and I accompanied him to the hospital for further tests. Faced with these mounting challenges, I remembered his mother's harsh directive to only contact them for weddings or funerals. Yet I couldn't bear to keep Raymond's condition a secret from his family. Gathering my courage, I called them, my hand shaking as the phone rang, each tone twisting my stomach into tighter knots. Hearing my mother-in-law's voice instantly reignited my aversion to her, a testament to the strained ties between us. "Hello, it's Nancy," I began hesitantly. I apologize for not keeping in touch. There's something I need to tell you. Raymond has been hospitalized with a suspected gastric ulcer, and he's undergoing tests." Her response was devoid of concern. "A gastric ulcer? Probably from overworking," she said dismissively, adding, "Please spare me such trivial matters. I'm busy." Her indifference to her son's health shocked me. "Trivial? Don't you care about Raymond?" I responded, frustration boiling over. "I won't bother you anymore. I'll call Raymond directly," I concluded, my voice laden with disappointment. Before I could hang up, my brother-in-law grabbed the phone. "You're too persistent. Can't you read the room?" he chastised. "Whether Raymond is in the hospital or not, your constant calls are irritating." With that, he ended the call abruptly, leaving me reeling from the blunt rejection. The harsh dismissal from my in-laws cut deeper than I had anticipated, shattering any remaining hope for reconciliation. At that moment, I made a solemn vow to myself. If they didn't want me to contact them, fine. I wanted nothing more to do with them. I would never reach out again, no matter the circumstances. Following Raymond's recovery, which thankfully involved a mild gastric ulcer, he strictly adhered to his medication and experienced significant improvement. I shared the entire ordeal with Raymond, who listened with a resolute determination. "Let's distance ourselves from my family," he declared firmly. "The only person who matters to me now is you, Nancy. If they can't accept you, then they're not family to me, regardless of blood ties." A year later, Raymond pursued his long-standing aspiration to establish a software sales business, drawing on his previous job experience. His relentless dedication paid off, and even though our venture was still in its nascent stages, seeing even a fraction of his vision materialize filled me with immense joy. Our happiness was further amplified by the arrival of our healthy baby boy, a year into Raymond's entrepreneurial journey. My parents shared in our elation, frequently visiting us despite the lengthy journey from their home. We opted not to inform Raymond's parents of our son's birth, certain that their indifference would remain unchanged. Their silence since our last confrontation offered us a sense of relief, freeing us from the burdensome ties of a strained relationship. Several months later, as the global pandemic of the new coronavirus swept across the world, our country declared a state of emergency, urging citizens to stay indoors. News broadcasts were inundated with discussions of the pandemic's impact, particularly on industries such as restaurants and tourism. While my heart ached for those affected, I briefly wondered about Raymond's father's package tour company, but it was merely a passing thought. As we navigated through the challenges, I noticed a troubling change in Raymond. He became ill and was rushed to the hospital with severe stomach pains, later diagnosed as a suspected gastric ulcer. Consumed with worry, I insisted he take some time off work, and I stayed by his side through his hospital visits and tests. Despite these mounting challenges, we were careful about how much we involved Raymond's family. I remembered his mother's stern words, limiting our communication to only weddings or funerals. Yet, I couldn't keep such significant news about Raymond's health from them. With a heavy heart, I picked up the phone, my hand trembling as it dialed their number. The phone rang, each tone twisting my stomach into tighter knots. When my mother-in-law answered, her voice instantly brought back a flood of negative feelings, a testament to our strained relationship. "Hello, it's Nancy. I apologize for not keeping in touch, but there's something important you should know. Raymond has been hospitalized. They suspect it might be a gastric ulcer, and he's undergoing further tests," I explained, hoping for a shred of concern or empathy. "A gastric ulcer? Probably from overworking," she replied dismissively, then added, "Please spare me from such trivial matters. I'm busy." Her cold indifference to her son's health shocked me. "Don't you care about Raymond at all?" I retorted, frustration boiling over. "I won't bother you again. I'll speak to Raymond directly." I was about to hang up when my brother-in-law took the phone. "You're too persistent. Can't you read the room?" he chastised. "Whether Raymond is in the hospital or not, your constant calls are irritating." He ended the call abruptly, leaving me reeling from their blunt rejection. This harsh dismissal cut deeper than I had anticipated, destroying any remaining hope for reconciliation. At that moment, I resolved never to reach out again, no matter the circumstances. Following Raymond's recovery from what turned out to be a mild gastric ulcer, he adhered strictly to his medication and saw significant improvement. I shared the entire ordeal with Raymond, who listened with resolute determination. "Let's keep our distance from my family," he declared firmly. "The only person who matters to me now is you, Nancy. If they can't accept you, they're not my family, regardless of our blood ties." A year later, Raymond pursued his long-standing aspiration of establishing a software sales business, leveraging his previous job experience. His dedication paid off, and our venture began to show promising signs of success. Our happiness was further amplified by the arrival of our healthy baby boy a year into Raymond's entrepreneurial journey. We decided not to inform Raymond's parents about our son's birth, convinced their indifference would remain unchanged. Months later, as the global pandemic swept across the world, our country declared a state of emergency. News reports discussed the impact on various industries, including restaurants and tourism. I briefly wondered about Raymond's father's package tour company, but dismissed the thought quickly. Despite the challenges, Raymond's business thrived. While the initial phase of our entrepreneurial journey saw some financial instability, recent months have brought a surge in income, surpassing even Raymond's previous earnings. Our future looked promising, a testament to our resilience in the face of adversity. During this period, Raymond began receiving numerous calls from his parents' home. Despite their persistent attempts at communication, Raymond was determined to avoid any interaction, intentionally ignoring the calls and disregarding the voicemails left behind. I often reassured him, "You don't need to worry about me. It's all right to reach out to them." While I harbored deep-seated disdain for his family, I couldn't shake the guilt of causing Raymond to sever ties with his parents. Yet Raymond remained resolute in his stance, affirming, "Nancy is my top priority, not my parents. If they can't accept you, regardless of their parental status, I can't hold them in high regard." Despite Raymond's steadfast avoidance, the persistence of his parents was relentless. Daily calls went unanswered, and then one day, a letter arrived from his family home bearing a startling message. "Our business is teetering on the edge of bankruptcy, and urgent financial discussions are necessary," it read. Their audacity was staggering, considering the estranged relationship they had imposed. We refused to entertain their demands, opting instead to let them face the consequences of their actions. "Let them face the repercussions of their decisions," I remarked. Soon enough, my phone began to ring incessantly. Occupied with work, I couldn't attend the calls, but a voicemail left a clear indication of Raymond's continued avoidance. It seemed they had resorted to contacting me, despite my explicit instructions to the contrary. Reluctantly, I listened to the message left on my voicemail, which simply stated, "Is this Nancy's number? If Raymond persists in his silence, I'll visit in person. Let him know." 3 days following the voicemail, Raymond and I found ourselves enjoying a rare day off together at home. Just as we settled in after lunch, the doorbell chimed, signaling an unexpected visitor. Peering through the monitor, I was met with the sight of my 5 in-laws standing at the doorstep. Surprised, I looked at Raymond, who let out a weary sigh. "We could just ignore them. They'll eventually give up," he suggested. However, I couldn't shake the sense of pity. "They've come all this way. It wouldn't hurt to let them in," I countered. After a brief moment of contemplation, Raymond relented, unlocking the door to face whatever awaited us on the other side. While I understood their difficult situation, I couldn't easily help someone who had previously cut off all ties with me. Yet, I was open to reconsidering if they showed true sincerity. My father-in-law tried to intimidate me, his face twisted with anger, but I stood firm, telling him calmly, "You're free to leave if you disagree." As he continued to plead for help, I remained resolute. Eventually, he asked the others to apologize, which led to a collective plea from the group. I politely declined their appeals, keeping my cool even as my father-in-law's frustration boiled over. He slammed his hand on the table and, in a burst of anger, grabbed my collar, accusing me of arrogance. Just as I was about to respond, Raymond intervened, firmly telling his dad not to touch me. His father snapped back, challenging Raymond's loyalty to me over his parents. Raymond was unyielding, stating, "Nancy is my priority. I cannot ignore mistreatment towards her, even from my parents. We don't need superficial apologies just for money. If you can't sincerely apologize, you need to leave." This made his father lash out physically, striking Raymond in the face. I was shocked and tried to calm the situation, but my father-in-law was beyond reason, continuing his aggressive behavior. In an attempt to protect Raymond, I tried to hold back my father-in-law, but he pushed me away, causing me to hit my head against the table, which started bleeding. While the other family members watched in shock, my father-in-law's rampage escalated as he demanded money and started ransacking the room. In desperation, I opened the balcony window and shouted for help. The police arrived soon after. Upon their arrival, my father-in-law switched to a calm demeanor, feigning innocence and claiming a misunderstanding. He tried to portray me as intoxicated and delusional. I explained to the police officer what happened, urging them to take action. He denied everything but lost his temper again and punched a hole in the wall, which led to his immediate arrest. The aftermath left Raymond with a minor facial injury, while I needed 13 stitches for the wound on my head. Despite feeling guilty about Raymond's injury, I was relieved that the continuous demands for money from my in-laws had stopped, giving them time to reflect on their actions. I later found out that my father-in-law had initially spoken well of me, but jealousy from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law had poisoned their attitudes, leading to poor treatment. As a result of their actions and attitudes, my in-laws faced financial ruin. Their business failed and they lost their home, now living in a modest apartment and struggling to find work. Meanwhile, my brother-in-law, affected by his circumstances, fell into a gambling habit, and my sister-in-law's difficult personality hindered her job prospects. After these events, my father retired, leading to a decision for my parents and us to live together, a suggestion surprisingly made by Raymond out of concern for my parents' well-being. Now, with my parents' help with childcare, I'm able to balance my career and family life. Surrounded by my loving husband, supportive parents, and our beloved son, life feels incredibly fulfilling. I'm determined to cherish this happiness and remain grateful for every blessing. Hello, I'm Patricia, a 34-year-old who leads a pretty ordinary life, balancing a regular job while raising my son. Romance wasn't a big part of my life until I hit my 30s. That's when, concerned about me being single, my parents introduced me to William. He seemed perfect, deeply committed to his family, which resonated with my values. We married, and it felt like everything was falling into place, a real-life fairy tale. 8 months into our marriage, our lives took a dramatic turn. William called me several times one day, sounding exhausted. When I returned his calls, he broke the news that his father, Paul, had suddenly collapsed at home and was rushed to the hospital. Unfortunately, Paul passed away, leaving a void in our lives, especially for William's mother, who was left to cope alone. William stepped up, spending a lot of time with her, taking her out, and even planning trips to help her through her grief. The situation became complicated when I won a trip to the Hawaii through a contest, instead of seeing it as a chance for us to get away and perhaps heal, William saw an opportunity. He threatened to divorce me unless I allowed him and his mother to go on the trip without me, leveraging the prize to ensure his mother's happiness. His mother seemed quite content with this arrangement, but I was left feeling manipulated and sidelined. Determined not to let them undermine me so easily, I decided to stand up for myself. I wasn't just going to accept their plan without a fight. The situation revealed a side of William that I hadn't anticipated, one that was willing to use emotional blackmail to get what he wanted. This realization was disheartening, but it also steeled my resolve to address the dynamics of our relationship and ensure my own happiness wasn't continually sacrificed. It wasn't that William completely neglected me, but whenever our plans seemed to clash with his commitments to his mother, he invariably chose her side. His typical responses were, "Sorry, Patricia, Mom needs me," or "We planned this with Mom a long time ago." Although I outwardly agreed, inside I was often seething with frustration. Why was it always me who had to bend? Wasn't William's mom being overly demanding? Despite this ongoing issue, William's closeness to his mother was undeniable, and aside from this, our marriage seemed stable. I just assumed that this was the norm for some families. My own little escape became engaging in crossword puzzles that offered prizes. This hobby was especially perfect for times when William was preoccupied with his mom. Occasionally, I'd even win gift cards or meals, which was a nice bonus. Then, one day, I hit the jackpot. I won 2 tickets to the Hawaii. Thrilled, I double and triple checked the win before even thinking about making travel arrangements. Initially, I considered inviting William but hesitated, knowing his tendency to involve his mom in our travels. After some reflection, I decided the tickets would be a wonderful gift for my parents. On my way home, I stopped by their house to deliver the exciting news. Bursting with excitement, I announced, "Mom, guess what? I won tickets to Hawaii." Her eyes lit up with surprise and joy. "Wow, that's fantastic. You and William must be thrilled," she responded. I paused for a moment, then said, "Actually, I want you and Dad to have them." Mom looked genuinely astonished, yet touched by the gesture, unsure of what to say next. "Are you sure?" my mom asked, her voice tinged with surprise and delight when I told her about the tickets. "Absolutely," I replied. "William travels enough as it is. I want you and Dad to enjoy this opportunity." Mom's face lit up with joy, but I noticed a hint of concern on Dad's face. "What's wrong?" I asked, catching his worried expression. "Well, it's a busy time of year at the company. I'm not sure I can take time off right now," Dad explained, his tone apologetic. "That's unfortunate," I sighed, feeling a mix of disappointment and understanding. Then Dad brightened up with a suggestion. "Why not take Amy instead? It was your prize originally, right? You should go and have some quality time together," he proposed. Mom nodded in agreement, clearly excited by the idea. "That sounds wonderful." Feeling a renewed sense of excitement, I applied for leave the next day, which was quickly approved. I then called the airline to arrange for the tickets to be used by Amy and me. On my way home from work, I stopped at a bookstore and picked up a guidebook for Hawaii. It had been ages since Mom and I had traveled together, and I was genuinely looking forward to it. When I got home expecting the house to be empty, I was surprised to find the lights on. I had assumed William was still out, but instead of his shoes, I saw a familiar pair of women's shoes at the entrance. Puzzled, I walked in to find Kelly emerging from the living room. "Patricia, do you know what time it is?" she scolded as soon as she saw me. "Oh, Kelly, I didn't realize you were here," I replied, taken aback by her presence and tone. "It's not just about me being here. It's late, and William will be back soon," she continued, her voice carrying a note of reproach. "I'm sorry, I'll start on dinner right away," I apologized, rushing towards the kitchen. But Kelly didn't stop there. She launched into a critique of my absence, making it clear she expected more from me in managing the household. Her words stung, but they also reminded me of the ever-tightening boundaries in my life that I was increasingly determined to expand. Kelly questioned my commitment as a daughter-in-law with a heavy sigh, attributing my perceived lapses to my job. According to her, my priorities should place home significantly ahead of work. She often used her spare key to drop in unannounced, especially since she lived close by. Kelly clung to outdated views about the role of a daughter-in-law, expecting me to dedicate myself to serving William and his family without any objections. Her persistent critiques made it increasingly difficult for me to feel any warmth towards her. While I was unpacking groceries and starting to prepare dinner, Kelly's voice cut through the air with sudden urgency. "Wait, what's this, Patricia? Are you planning a trip to Hawaii?" She had stumbled upon the guidebook I had just purchased. "Kelly, why are you rummaging through my things?" I asked, frustration coloring my tone. "That's not the point. Why are you planning to go to Hawaii?" she demanded, her voice sharp. "I won a trip in a contest. I was planning to give it to my mom," I explained, trying to maintain my composure. "I haven't heard anything about this. Why should I?" Kelly snapped back, her demeanor confrontational. Our argument was abruptly cut off by William's arrival. Kelly wasted no time in informing him about her discovery, pointing at me accusingly. "William, listen, Patricia's being thoughtless. Did she do something wrong?" she prodded him. William turned to me, his expression stern. "What's going on here?" he demanded. "I won the trip and wanted to give it to my parents, but since Dad can't go, I thought Mom could go with me," I replied calmly, trying to explain the situation before it escalated further. "Why didn't you discuss this with me first?" William asked, his tone a mix of confusion and irritation. "It's my prize, William," I said, my frustration evident as I faced him. "What's the big deal? You always travel with Kelly." "It's not the same. Mom and I only go on trips within the country. We haven't been abroad in years," William countered, his voice rising. "How could you decide this without talking to me?" He slammed his hand on the table, cutting me off. "You're getting too bold for a daughter-in-law. Mom and I are going, and you're staying home, Mommy," he declared, his choice of words making me wince at their childish tone. "Wait a minute, you've had enough of this trip," I said, trying to maintain my composure. "If you're not happy, let's talk about divorce then." I couldn't believe I was hearing him use the threat of divorce over something like this. It seemed utterly ridiculous. Fuming, I shot back. "I won this trip fair and square. I've already decided to give it to my mom. Can't you see the signs for once? Mom wants to go. When does it end with always putting Kelly first? You never consider how I feel." "I don't care how you feel. Like I said, this trip is for me and Mommy. Stay home and behave," William insisted coldly, his dismissive attitude chilling. My affection for William was quickly diminishing. It was clear I ranked lower than Kelly in his priorities. I couldn't keep dealing with this ridiculous dynamic. I calmly told William, "Fine, do what you want and enjoy your trip. You should have listened in the first place." "Do what you want," William replied dismissively, a far cry from the caring person I once knew. Meanwhile, Kelly looked smug and victorious, reveling in the turn of events. Deciding I needed space, I resolved to leave the house while they were away on their trip. The distance would give me time to think and perhaps figure out a way forward from this deepening rift. I decided to let William and Kelly go ahead with the vacation plans. The next day, I called the airline to transfer the tickets to William and his mom. However, the conversation took an unexpected turn. The airline representative sounded concerned as they informed me, "I'm sorry, but once the participants are confirmed, we can't change them." "Is that so?" I asked, a wave of disappointment washing over me. "Yes, and this ticket requires the actual winner to be one of the travelers. So, if it's your husband and mother-in-law, the ticket won't be valid," the operator explained. "So if I don't go, the ticket is useless?" I clarified, seeking confirmation on the restriction. "Exactly. Please check the documents we sent you. They mention this condition," they advised. After reviewing the documents, it became clear that only the winner, which was me, could use the ticket, and it couldn't be transferred. I decided against telling William and Kelly immediately and instead made plans for them to travel at their own expense if they chose to do so. That evening, after returning from work, I casually brought up the topic of the Hawaii trip to gauge William's thoughts. "Hey, how about that trip?" I initiated. "Yeah, did you talk to the airline? Are Mommy and I all set to go?" William asked eagerly, his anticipation evident. "I did call them," I said, handing over the winning documents along with the tickets. "Here are the documents and the tickets." "I only need the tickets. I won't bother reading the documents," William replied dismissively. "But there might be important details in there, especially since it's an international trip," I suggested, hinting at the necessity of understanding the ticket conditions. "I don't think I need to. Mommy and I are just excited about the trip." William brushed off my suggestion, his focus solely on the upcoming vacation. As William skimmed over the necessity of reading the fine print, I felt a mix of frustration and resignation. It was clear that the details, which were crucial to the trip's feasibility, were being overlooked in the rush of excitement. With William's dismissive attitude towards the details of our travel documents, I could only hope he would eventually pay attention to the information they contained. "And I have got it covered. We're efficient, unlike you," he retorted dismissively. "Fine, whatever. I'll leave them here just in case," I replied, placing the documents on the table, knowing well that William might overlook the vital details they held. As expected, on the day of their trip, after making sure William had left, I packed my bags and headed to my parents' house for a quiet stay. While unpacking, the anticipated call from William came through. As soon as I picked up, he burst out, "Hey, what's going on? They're saying the ticket can't be used." "That's right. If the winner doesn't go, the ticket is invalid," I explained calmly, trying to keep the conversation as neutral as possible. "What? Why didn't you tell me this earlier?" William demanded, his voice a mixture of confusion and frustration. "I did tell you. Remember, I mentioned it might be a good idea to read the instructions," I reminded him, hoping he'd recall our earlier conversation. "You mean it was written in those documents you gave me?" William asked, his frustration evident. "Exactly. It's your fault for not reading. This is ridiculous," I replied, maintaining my composure despite his growing agitation. "So how are we supposed to get to Hawaii?" William asked, his tone getting more agitated by the minute. "Well, the operator did mention that if the winner doesn't go, you'd have to pay the full price," I replied matter-of-factly. Caught off guard by the situation, William sounded frantic, and I could hear Kelly's voice in the background, signaling their shared distress. "William, what did Patricia say?" Kelly demanded. "Mommy, if Patricia doesn't go, we have to pay for the trip," William started to explain, his voice tinged with disbelief before handing the phone to Kelly. "Let me talk to her," she insisted, ready to take over the conversation, presumably to find a way out of their predicament. "I can't deal with this anymore," Kelly demanded sharply. I decided to let them sort it out themselves and hung up without another word. It wasn't long before William called back. "Hello?" I answered, bracing myself for more drama. "What is it now? I'm busy," I said coldly, not in the mood for further complications. "It's not what is it," William sounded flustered. "I tried to buy the tickets, but the credit card isn't working," he explained. "Huh, I don't know anything about your card," I replied, genuinely puzzled. "It's not mine, it's your card," William clarified. "Oh, so you're saying you used my card without my permission?" I accused, my tone icy. "I just need to fix it now. When I checked my wallet this morning, my card was missing. I had a hunch and immediately froze it," I said, realizing why he was having issues. "I knew you stole it," William retorted angrily. "Are you kidding me? I was planning to shop with that card abroad. You're always messing things up," I fired back, my frustration mounting. "You freaking witch," William snapped, his voice harsh, showing no remorse for taking the trip or using my card without permission. Fed up with his selfish behavior, I coldly rebuked him. A jerk. Who were you calling a witch after mocking others all the time? You should just go to hell, I exclaimed, my patience completely worn thin. What? Who are you talking to like that? William asked, sounding offended and taken aback. Who do you think? Calling out for mommy is honestly creepy, I retorted, highlighting the oddness of his dependency. This entire situation had escalated beyond simple travel plans into a revealing insight into deeper issues in our relationship. If you love your mom so much, maybe you two should just stay together. I can't handle being married to a mama's boy. There's no value for us in staying together, I declared, my voice heavy with exasperation. Hey, calm down. If you keep this up, we'll end up getting a divorce, William threatened, his tone sharp. Fine by me. I was thinking the same thing, I retorted, my mind made up. I've left the house and don't plan to come back. Enjoy your time abroad with your beloved mommy. Hope you both have a great trip, I added sarcastically before hanging up, feeling a mix of anger and relief. Furious, I ended the calls and immediately blocked William and his mother on all my devices. Then, I followed my dad's advice and went to a law firm to start the process of ending my marriage. When I reviewed our finances to divide our assets, I discovered our joint account was empty. William had withdrawn money multiple times, coinciding with his trips with his mom. It was clear he'd used our savings for their travels and had also used my credit card without my permission. I demanded significant compensation from him, which resulted in him owing money and being pursued by creditors. His once indulgent mother, who used to get whatever she wanted, now found herself in a strained relationship with William. They argued every time they met, a stark contrast to their previous closeness. It's ironic how things turned out, considering how spoiled he used to be. Meanwhile, I decided to stay with my parents for a while. The ordeal had caused them to worry, and I wanted to make it up to them by living with them and taking care of them. Being away from the chaos of my marriage, I realized that what's truly important is having a loving, supportive family. Going through this divorce reaffirmed that belief, helping me rediscover what matters.